Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into the anatomy of a data risk, looking specifically at the SASB customer privacy standards. Let's get right to it. So, what actually happens when your finance company decides to share your data? Think about it for a second. When you apply for a credit card or maybe a personal loan, you hand over an absolute mountain of personal information, right? And generally, we just expect it to be used to manage our accounts. But the SASB Consumer Finance Standard forces us to look under the hood at the invisible, behind-the-scenes ways your personal financial data might be utilized. And honestly, it goes way beyond just processing your monthly statement. To really understand this risk, we have to pin down the catalyst. According to the SASB standard, the core of this entire risk revolves around what they call a secondary purpose. Basically, this means intentionally using data outside the primary reason it was collected in the first place. A couple of massive examples here: selling targeted advertisements or transferring your info to a third party through a sale, rental, or sharing agreement. We aren't just talking about processing a basic transaction anymore. We are literally talking about monetizing your digital footprint. It's kind of like a company selling your daily coffee purchase history directly to a targeted ad network. And the sheer amount of data these consumer finance companies hold, it's breathtaking. I mean, your bank probably knows way more about your daily habits than you do. The SASB standard explicitly breaks down the information at risk here. We're looking at demographic data, so your age, your gender, your employment status; behavioral data, which tracks your online browsing patterns, your buying habits, what brands you like; location data, literally your exact GPS coordinates; and personal data, meaning any piece of information that identifies you as a living individual. When this absolute treasure trove of data gets exploited for those secondary purposes, well, the stakes go through the roof. Now, when a company mismanages all that data, it sets off a seriously dangerous domino effect. The SASB framework maps out a very clear chain reaction here. It all starts with a customer privacy failure. When customers find out their data is being used for targeted ads or sold off without their explicit consent, boom, step 2 triggers immediately: lost consumer confidence. But it doesn't stop there. The standard explicitly points out that failing to safeguard this privacy makes a company highly susceptible to high employee turnover. Let's be real, nobody wants to work for a company that's constantly embroiled in a shady privacy scandal. And ultimately, steps 1, 2, and 3 slam right into step 4: decreased revenues. Failing to protect customer data isn't just a PR headache, it is a direct, measurable hit to the bottom line.
So here's the million-dollar question. We know the risk is there, and we know for a fact it destroys value. But how do investors and analysts take that abstract risk and actually measure it? If you're comparing two different credit card companies, how do you mathematically quantify their exact exposure to these privacy risks?
Well, how does this translate into actual accounting metrics? The SASB framework gives us two very specific quantitative codes to track a company's exposure. The first one, FNCF 220A.1, measures the sheer scale of the practice. It literally asks for the exact number of account holders whose information is being used for secondary purposes. The second one, FNCF 220A.2, tracks the actual fallout. It measures the total monetary losses resulting from legal proceedings tied to customer privacy. Boiling it all down, how many people's data are you sharing, and exactly how much has that sharing cost you in a court of law? Let's dig a little deeper into that first metric, the one about the number of account holders. The SASB standard actually requires companies to go way beyond just throwing a number on a page. They have to describe their policies. How are they disclosing these practices to you, the customer? Crucially, they have to detail the exact nature of their opt-in policy, and the standard defines opt-in as explicit, affirmative consent required to use or share content. It asks, is that consent freely given? Is it specific, informed, unambiguous? Really, it's a measure of pure transparency. Do your customers actually know what you're doing with their location and behavioral data, or is it just buried in the fine print? Now, shifting over to that second metric, the monetary losses. The standard sets some really strict boundaries here. It specifically includes all monetary liabilities paid out to opposing parties. We're talking settlements, trial verdicts, and fines from civil, regulatory, and criminal actions. But, and this is a really important distinction, it explicitly excludes the legal fees and expenses a company racks up in its own defense. Why do they do that? Well, because the metric is designed to isolate the actual penalty, the real-world financial consequence of the privacy failure. They want to strip out the highly variable cost of just how expensive a company's defense lawyers happen to be. And just to really hammer home the sheer severity of this, the standard explicitly targets liabilities from civil, regulatory, and even criminal actions. Let that sink in. We are not just talking about an annoyed customer demanding a refund here. We're talking about state regulators swooping in. We are talking about potential criminal judgments and massive restitution. Unmanaged data risks, they can escalate incredibly fast into absolutely devastating financial consequences.
And look, when these massive losses inevitably do occur, the SASB standard demands one final, incredibly vital piece of the puzzle. The entity has to briefly describe the nature and context of those monetary losses. Was it a fraud issue? Was it a simple disclosure error? And most importantly, what corrective actions did they implement in response? They literally have to tell investors exactly what changes they're making to their operations, their management, their training, or their tech to guarantee it never ever happens again. This level of reporting transparency is absolutely critical. It's what standardizes sustainability data and really helps long-term investors gauge a company's true resilience.
Which brings us to our final thought for this explainer. We've looked at the massive breadth of data collected, that brutal chain reaction of lost trust leading straight to lost revenue, and the severe legal, even criminal penalties of getting this wrong. So, knowing all of this and seeing exactly how strictly the SASB framework measures it, can consumer finance companies really afford not to prioritize a transparent opt-in culture? It's pretty clear that rigorous privacy safeguards are no longer just a matter of good ethics. They are literally a fundamental pillar of financial sustainability. Definitely something to think about the next time you hastily tap agree on a brand new financial app.